After 5 years of trying to break out as an indie game developer, I experienced some big wake-up calls that convinced me it was time to totally change my strategy. In this video, I wanted to share my raw, honest thoughts about what I think I was doing wrong, why I'm changing my priorities, and why I think this new direction is going to be a lot better for managing a sustainable, long-term indie game development career. So like most of us, I started out in game dev trying to learn to make the sorts of games that I like playing, but in 2019, I decided to start taking game dev more seriously and learn the business side. I quickly came to understand that I can't just make my dream game, and soon enough, I found that classic triple Venn diagram. You know, the one that says to make a game you want to make, the game you can make, and the game that you can sell. Now, if you've ever tried to follow this diagram, you probably ran into the same problems that I did during this time. First of all, how do you even know if you end up with an idea that will sell? How do you know if you can finish it? How much time should you spend? And if you do try to make a small game that you can sell, how can you possibly expect it to still be the game that you want to make? Sooner or later, I always tried to go back to making an RPG. I thought if I can't make my dream game, the very reason I got into game dev in the first place, what was the point? This was very frustrating to me. My passion was in world building and factions and character builds, but deep down I knew that game wasn't the game I could make or sell. And every time I tried to make a simple game, I didn't really care about it. But my perspective began to change once I got laid off from my job, or I guess I should say it was forced to change. I wasn't sure if I wanted to get a new job or go all in with game dev and YouTube, but the more I thought about it, the more I knew that game dev really was the thing I wanted to do. But I couldn't go on making the wrong game. I had to take this seriously, and so after several months of trying different things, I finally came up with a new strategy that I believe will allow me to maintain game dev as a long-term career. So here's what I'm doing now. First of all, small games. For myself, I have totally lost interest in starting small and eventually making bigger games. Instead, I've decided that I'm just going to always try to make small games. There are just so many advantages to doing this. You need to make less money per game, you launch more games and get more data. Your motivation doesn't need to last as long. You can try a bunch of different things, you can take certain shortcuts and be more creative. And you take on a lot less risks than spending several years on one game waiting for a big payout at the end, and can instead rely on more frequent smaller payouts. But even with making small games, I still had the problem of creating ideas for games I wanted to make, could sell, and finish in 3 months. I couldn't just build the first game that came to mind. I would need to build a system that I could use to reliably and repeatedly generate game ideas that were both marketable, simple, and most importantly, that would inspire me to really want to build them. How hard could that be? Well, it's taken a while, but over the past month, myself and a few other devs have been testing and improving upon this exact system. Because I knew I wasn't the only one who'd want to do this. Whether you want to make 3-month games or 2-year games, we all want to make sure our ideas will work. So I had these guys go through my plan, and I went through it myself. And to give you some context, I now have 5 game ideas I can make in a really short time frame that are all appealing enough to justify the time spent, and it also seems to have worked for Natty, Eggroll, Jeremy, Gnome, and Cope Cola. Since then, I've refined the process because there were a few approaches that didn't quite work, and the result is a step-by-step system that I can just go through whenever I need to make a new game to guarantee an idea that will appeal to the Steam market, that I can finish quickly, and that I actually really want to build. If you want to try this out for yourself, you finally can, because I've turned it into a fully detailed workshop that you can check out below. I'm really excited about this, and it's going to totally transform the way you think about your game idea and enable you to finally build that game in the center of the Venn diagram, just like it has for me and the others. So let's now talk about the first game that I came up with that I'm working on right now. It's very different from anything I've done before, and to be honest, out of my 5 ideas, I think it's probably the least marketable one, but it is unique and has a very small scope, which means as long as I stick to my time frame, I'll be good to go. So the game is called Bound in a Nutshell in Infinite Space, and it comes with a few pros and cons right off the bat. Let's start off with what makes the idea good, and then I'll talk about some of the potential problems I expect to run into as I get closer to launch. So first of all, and most importantly, it's a horror game, which is a genre that is good for the Steam market. Chris Zukowski recommends horror games as one of the genres that work well for indie developers. On top of that, it's a pretty unique take on the genre. There are a lot of space-themed horror games out there, but there aren't a lot that keep you in zero gravity. My game is inspired by real-life technology, and in real life, although we could have pursued simulated gravity, instead we settled on just dealing with the challenges of zero-G. So theoretically, the difficulty of navigating in zero-G could also provide a unique challenge to players in a horror context. The other advantages are more personal. It's an idea that I'm really interested in. I really enjoyed researching the International Space Station and new space stations that are potentially going to be developed, and all the different new space technology that's being built by SpaceX and other companies. Space is fascinating and terrifying, and it's just been great building out the station and creating the aesthetic and the mood. It's also a very cathartic story for me. Looking back, I noticed that I was the most driven to finish a project when I had some sort of emotional motivation behind me. I won't get too much into the details, but essentially exploring this narrative and launching this game will make me feel like I've gained some sort of closure, so that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. On a more practical note, the game's design and scope are super limited. The events that need to happen are very clear. The features I need to implement are super simple. The difficulty will be in the dialogue and the writing, which I'll have plenty of time to write while traveling for the next few weeks. Even if it doesn't get done in 3 months, it'll be pretty close. Now, on the flip side, let's talk about some of the problems with this idea. First of all, the title is experimental. It's supposed to be weird and make you think, what does that even mean? Which might be a good thing, but it might be a really bad idea that will make the game impossible to find. I was thinking about sci-fi classics like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, but the actual title comes from a line from Hamlet that only partially fits the game thematically, but again, the fact that the dev cycle is so short means I can do experiments like this, so I guess we'll find out in November. A much more significant issue is the fact that I think I rushed the launch of my Steam page. This isn't the biggest deal because the marketing won't really kick in until I have a playtest running, but it's still a missed opportunity. The trailer doesn't show gameplay and the screenshots don't either. It's not yet clear why anyone should play this game. I didn't even show any dialogue with the other character that will be there, which is a key part of the experience. So I'll have to do a much better job with the gameplay trailer, and I don't have a great deal of time and I need to be moving forward. Another serious issue is that the gameplay is just not that exciting. You'll have to navigate the space station in Zero-G, which might honestly just end up being really annoying with the way you bounce off walls, so I'm still trying to figure out a way that makes it less frustrating. The main tension gameplay will be when you have to spacewalk to fix some equipment outside and deal with your oxygen depleting, which I think will help, but the game itself is primarily a vehicle for the story. The fantasy of being in space is kind of appealing, but it's still to be seen if people find the gameplay satisfying. So my hope is that given the horror nature of the game, the strength will be the mood and the atmosphere, and the experience will be overall positive as players dig into the story. We'll see. One more serious concern I have is that the game is much more psychological horror and thriller rather than being chased by a monster. The problem with that is that the monster is a huge part of horror game branding and appeal. If there's no monster, is it really a horror game? Or rather, is that something that Steam players will be interested in, or will it just turn them off? There is a monster, but it's not something that looks frightening or grotesque, it's just unsettling. It's more so about trust and deception and social interaction as opposed to having an actual physical threat to deal with. So again, we'll see. And the short dev cycle will allow me to at least comfortably give it a shot and take the risk. I think my next two ideas are a little bit better. I don't want to talk too much about them just yet. I'll just say that one of them is sort of a joke dating sim, which will take even faster than the space game to get done. And the other one is more of a simulator style game where you play out the fantasy of doing a very specific, really cool job, and I couldn't find any game like it that exists. I won't get into exactly what the simulator is about, but I'm confident it's going to have really solid gameplay appeal for the right audience on Steam. Coming up with good ideas is the most important part of game development. The majority of the marketing is in the product, and the majority of the product's appeal is in the idea. Therefore, making a game without a good idea is like having no foundation to a building. It will not stand. If you want to make the most of your game and your long-term solo game dev career, be sure to check out that Game Ideas workshop below. You're going to love it, and I'm confident it will inspire you with exciting ideas that will greatly increase the chance of your success as an indie game developer. But once you have that idea, you still have to tell people about it and spread the word. So if you want to learn more about indie game marketing, watch this video next where I go over the exact system that pretty much every game developer goes through when selling their games so that you can take advantage of it and streamline the process. Thank you so much for watching. Wish me luck as I dive further into this new strategy. Best of luck with your games, and God bless.